first Sunday after the season of Epiphany, my daughter Catherine and I were in California. During the time you all were here at St. Peter's, listening to them reflect on the baptism of Jesus, Catherine and I were in church as well. We walked through a magnificent open-air cathedral. The screening floor consisted of rich, dark soil from which sprang green carpets of ferns, out of which towered the redwood trees. A deep silence pervaded the shadowy sanctuary. And then came the light. The sun shone through the mist, creating streams of light, bringing to mind this bit of poetry from the Romantic poet William Wordsworth. But trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. If any human being on this earth trails clouds of glory throughout his life, that person will be Jesus himself, whose birth was announced to the shepherds by an angel, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were terrified. Jesus was marked by God's glory at his baptism, when the Holy Spirit descended on Jesus in bodily form like a dove, and a voice came from heaven. You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased. Every year on this last Sunday after the Epiphany, we hear about the transfiguration of Jesus. God covers Jesus in glory yet again. Jesus goes up a mountain to pray, and while he is praying, God's glory covers him. Luke tells us that the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became dazzling white. Moses and Elijah appear in glory, and the disciples, weighed down by sleep but still aware, see Jesus in glory as well. And then the cloud of glory overshadows them all, and the disciples are terrified, just as the shepherds were terrified that night in the fields when the angel of the Lord came and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. From the cloud that overshadows them on the mountain that day comes the voice again. This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him. According to the scholar Gerhard Kittel, the word glory, as it is used in the New Testament, denotes divine and heavenly radiance, the loftiness and majesty of God, and even the being of God in God's world. When we see God's glory with our own eyes, awe and even terror are appropriate reactions. For after all, we are made from dust. We are the feeble and the frail. But we can feel in those rare moments when we become aware that God's glory surrounds us, that we are not only witnessing the loftiness and the majesty of God, but that we, insignificant as we are being drawn into the glory of God and being transformed by God's divine radiance into the people God means us to be, only by God's mercy. This transformation is what Paul refers to in his letter to the Protestant Corinthians, when he says that all of us, with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit. When we enter into God's glory, we are all being transformed by God into the people that God means us to be. This transformation does not occur all at once, but instead happens in what seem like often discouraging fits and starts. One step forward, 2 steps back. Luke, the writer of our gospel, gives us example after example of our halting transformations and God's continuing mercy for us. The very day after they had witnessed the transformation, right after the disciples have been immersed in God's glory, they are still unable to cast out a demon from the son of a desperate man. A little later, they don't understand Jesus when he talks about his imminent death, and they even argue about which one of them is the greatest. All of this is less than glorious. So as today's gospel ends, we find ourselves not on the mountain, enveloped in God's glory, but in the valley, surrounded and overwhelmed by the demands that we cannot fulfill on our own. But the gospel also reminds us that even in the valley, we are still with Jesus, who leads us on, expecting and encouraging our transformation into people through whom God's radiance and glory can shine. Paul says that it is by God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry, so don't lose heart. And we must not lose heart in the face of the divisions among us, in the disasters of war, and in the disregard for God that blinds us to God's glory and holds us in thrall to all that would destroy us. In this point, go to the limits of your longing. Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke points out that God goes with us in the daunting challenges that life brings. God speaks to us just as God spoke at Jesus, just as the disciples heard God's voice at Jesus' baptism, and God's voice coming from the cloud of God's glory that covered them on the mountain. And God speaks to each one of us as well. Rilke writes, God speaks to each of us as God makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words from God that we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by this seriousness. Give me your command. So listen for God does speak to each one of us. And if we listen, we will hear. Take God's hand. Go willingly into that terrifying cloud of God's glory, because it is in that cloud of glory that God will transform our lives, so that God's mercy can work in us and through us.